Hello, my name is Pini Reznik, and I'm going to talk today about existential crisis and the cloud native. So Container Solutions is this place I work at. It's a consulting company helping other companies to move to cloud native technology, so adopt them successfully. So a long time ago, Leo Tolstoy said that there are only two types of stories in literature. One is a man goes for a journey, and the second is a stranger comes to town. So I'm going to talk about a stranger, a variety of different strangers. But before we go there, let's talk first about our main protagonist. Who is our main character in the company in this story? So the main character is a company called Willsgrid. Willsgrid is a financial company, and it's mid-sized, maybe 200 to 500 people. They have some pretty strong IT department, and they're just doing fine. They have some competitors, but nothing unusual. It's a nice place to work at. Most people work 5 to 10 to 15 years there. It's pretty consistent, stable, and it's doing good business. If you pay close attention to this photograph, it's apparently Sony office because in every cubicle there is old PlayStation. Just saying. So the main character within Wellsgrid that I'm going to talk about is Jenny. Jenny is a technical manager. I'm also going to talk about engineers and the senior managers, but Jenny is the main character. She's probably a former engineer or project manager, and she sort of has an idea on how the business works and how technology works. So who are the strangers and why do they come? I mean, of course, they come to eat your lunch, right? But these are the three typical strangers in the world of finances. The first one is Starling Bank. It's a bank that was effectively built in 1 year. With in 2016 to 2017, when they started actually building the bank, within 1 year they got to the point that they had fully functional accounts and few first customers and few actually functional bank accounts. And at that point, they had less than 20 engineers. So purely cloud native, pure technology company, a startup. The second one is a large a tech giant, somebody like Amazon or Google or others. So they basically do whatever they like, right? They buy supermarket chains. They get into all kind of variety of different businesses. So Amazon, for example, if you didn't know, they have a banking license, active banking license in the United States. So actually they can become an active bank whenever they like. And some say that they could get up to 70 million customers within just a couple of years if they would like to. And the third type of stranger is somebody like ING Bank in Netherlands. This is a traditional bank that, like they said, we want to be a tech company with a banking license. So they spend the last 7 to 10 years actually becoming cloud native. They invest massive amount of effort in technology, into engineering, and they're really, really proud about this, and they talk about this all the time. And then there is a new type of stranger, which is a tiny virus that actually changing our lives overnight. And I'm going to talk about this a bit at the end of the presentation and give a bit of perspective on this. So, Wellsgrid is actually, again, it's a consistently successful company, and it's delivering its value pretty consistently to their customers, but it's linear. The delivery is linear, it's predictable. The speed of development is pretty much the same as it was for the last 15 years. The thing is, when those new disruptive companies, they come to your market, that it happens very fast. Imagine Uber and Airbnb. When they came, it happened almost overnight, in a matter of couple of years. And also you could say, it's not going to happen to me, right? In my industry, this never happened. But then imagine taxis and hotels. Those are very traditional industries with no central management, no single competitor or single company that defines the market. And yet they won the market in their separate markets. They won the entire competition essentially in the entire world almost overnight. So it will happen everywhere. And then again, Amazon is entering the supermarkets industry, so I would assume they are going to do something similar there. So why this is happening? The main reason, at least in my mind, is the speed of delivery of the value. Essentially, those new strangers, what they can do is very quickly build a piece of functionality, even if it's not fully finished. Take it to the customer, see what works, build 50 of those, see which one works better, then learn from it, measure what works, learn from it, and then deliver a better solution. And then do it again and again and again. So essentially, while you're delivering one version, they can deliver 50. And they learn from it. They are not just doing many more changes, they're just continuously learning and improving in dramatically faster speed. So, and what happens with this when this kind of change is happening? And now we're talking about slow market change, like the cloud native, right? Cloud native is about 5-6 years old, although the cloud native term is a bit younger, but generally it's 5-6 years old, and a company like WellsGrid, and it knows its competitors, and altogether they own the market. But then these newcomers like Starling, they start very slow, right? And then they operate on really low cost. It's just pure development. But once they start showing any sort of traction, then they get access. They get access essentially to unlimited funds using venture capital, and they put this money immediately entirely into development, into more value creation. So they can create massive amount of value very quickly, and they scale very fast. Their IT systems, their teams, everything is scaling very fast. On the other hand, if you're a traditional company like WellsGrid, what you see at that point in the beginning is really nothing, because it doesn't even register. You may not even know that this startup exists. But when there is any sort of traction and they start capturing your market share, what most of the companies would do if they lose even 2% of their revenue, what they start doing is cutting costs, right? If they see shrinking margins, they immediately start cutting costs. And they cut costs by cutting innovation, essentially closing down innovative projects. So what it means is that once you see those newcomers, once they are starting being active in your ecosystem and you pay attention because your margin goes down, at that point it could be too late to respond. Because at that point they are already probably won the race. And then there is this new element. Again, this coronavirus. What do you do about that? Right. So this could dramatically change everything overnight. And no one can predict when and how it's going to happen. So let's talk first about the slow market change. And then after that, I will talk about the Corona style fast or instant market change. So first, let's get back to Jenny and back to WellsGrid. So Jenny understands that there is a problem here. So she thinks we need to do something. But in the beginning, it's a new set of technologies, but it's at the end, it's just a bunch of tools. So they go to some conferences, some KubeCon, DockerCon, or whatever. They see Kubernetes, they think, how hard can it be? So maybe they're engineers, they try a bit of containers on their laptop and run with Docker Compose. All looks really, really cool. So what they do is basically, let's just do it, right? We don't need to tell anyone. It's just part of technical work. Let's just put some Kubernetes tasks on the backlog. Now, okay, how hard can it be? It can be actually really, really hard. So about 6 to 12 months down the line, what they realize is that almost nothing is done. Actually, there is really tiny elements of the system are sort of working somewhere, but there are some containers, some Kubernetes, some VMs in the cloud, but nothing really functional, nothing in production. The main reason is because the team, the engineering team, is still fully occupied with building the old products and delivering the value. Okay, so we need to do something else. What else? We need to split the team and do it properly this time. Sure, but for that such a massive transformation, you need the approval from the management. So next couple of months, Jenny and her engineers, their architects, spent on preparing very, very long and detailed architectural documents with return on investment and how much budget they need and everything. And eventually, a couple of months later, they actually get the approval and the budget. What they do, they split the team into two. One is a legacy part, another is a new cloud native platform. Great. 6 to 12 months later, still nothing done. And again, it's not nothing. Maybe 30% is finished, maybe some clusters are running, but still none of the production application, none of the applications, properly important business applications are in production. They're all in all kind of different states of readiness, right? Some in some sort of microservices, some in a massive monolithic container somewhere, but generally nothing is working. Now we are 1 or 2 years down the line and still nothing is working. So why it's so difficult? Basically, there are two answers. One, it's new, and two, it's complex. So CNCF, Cloud Native Compute Foundation, defines cloud native as microservices, containers, dynamic orchestration, which are technical terms. So basically containers, Kubernetes, and microservices, and they say it's to build great products faster. Essentially, they are saying the same thing. It's about faster time to market, to faster innovation, rather than massive scale. So although technologies, cloud native technologies came from scale, large companies to build them for massive scale, really they are mostly used by companies like WellsGrid for time to market and innovation. So then Cloud Native Foundation essentially saying that it's about containers, Kubernetes, and microservices. So infrastructure, provisioning, and architecture. So we think that it's much bigger effort. It also includes the delivery technology, how to do continuous delivery. It also includes the processes, agile versus lean versus waterfall. Teams, you need to use something like DevOps, something like SRE, and all the way up to the culture. So actually, you need to look at it as a holistic transformation. The entire business has to change, not just a technology stack. One of the most common errors that companies are making are by doing this transformation just on technical level or just on organizational level. The other challenge is it is a new ecosystem. There is explosion of tools and companies. There's over 1,200 boxes in this cloud native landscape by CNCF again. And it's just not that easy to choose the right platform and all the tools around it, all the monitor observability tools and storage and security and monitoring and everything. So there is the ecosystem is not yet mature enough. So back to WellsGrid. At this point, 1 or 2 years into the transformation, the CEO is not happy. He's like, yeah, I gave you all this time, all this money, all these people, but really the legacy team, the team that is building the old products, they are not delivering because, I mean, it's half the team, how they can deliver same speed as before. And on the other hand, you cannot even tell me when the new platform will be finished. And I understand once it's finished, everything will be perfect, but you don't know when it's going to happen. And really, Jenny doesn't know. Neither the engineers. They say it's 80% done, 70% done, which, in our world, it means nothing. So we need to do something else. But before we go into something else, let's go into a couple of tools. So the first one is creativity versus proficiency. This is actually pretty simple. There's generally two different approaches to any task. So any task in the beginning is a creative endeavor. You sort of have no idea. It's a mystery. You have no idea what to do about it. It's like Microsoft with the first McDonald's when they opened the first restaurant, which is try something. Every startup is starting at that stage. Then you go into more heuristic stage. That's where so in the beginning you experiment a lot and try to figure out what to do, just random trials and some research. In second, you sort of get the point, but then you need a lot of personal knowledge and you sort of get the idea, but you don't know why it works. But eventually it becomes very consistent and like the way McDonald's is today, by the book. And enterprises are like that. So they're bureaucratic, they're waterfall, and it's actually not a bad thing. It's actually proficiency is not better or worse than creativity, they're just different. The thing is that also the team structure is different. In creative teams, it's more just a bunch of people trying different things. And in the middle, it's some sort of Kanban agile, so you want to change direction very quickly, but still focus on something specific. When you get to algorithmic, it's about hierarchy and waterfall and lean. So everything is predictable and consistent. It's about scale and quality. And of course, you make all your money when you scale up to enterprise scale. What's important to understand is creative teams need to be managed differently. Teams like Pixar or Ideal, you want to give them the purpose and safety to experiment, safety to make mistakes, to do different things, to explore. On the other hand, proficient teams, you want them to be very consistent, high quality. They need to do the same thing over and over again. There is very high feedback. They immediately learn when they do something wrong. There is a set of rules. It's more like sport, right? More like All Blacks or like Navy SEALs. They do the same thing over and over again. Those are not better or worse approaches. They're different. And those teams, creative teams, need to be managed in different way than proficient teams. So, and then this model is basically related to that, which is McKinsey model about 3 horizons. So the horizon 1 is that's where the company's golden goose is, right? Or milking cow, right? So that's where the products that bring the money now play. So basically, majority of a balanced company would spend majority of the time that balanced company would go into delivery of current products. So basically maintaining them, improving them, building features for current products. Then significant portion of the time will go into innovation. Those are the things that will start bringing money a year or 2 years from now. And a good company will always invest a bit into long-term research, just to be ready for whatever comes. It's important to have good champions that will take the change from research through innovation to delivery, and also from delivery, define the research direction. Unfortunately, biggest problem in what we see in enterprises is too much is spent on building current products. Not enough is spent on innovation and research. Of course, startups, that's their business. Innovation is their business, so they hardly have any significant business to invest in. So they invest most of the time in innovation, and universities are pretty reasonably their business is research. So, and then the second tool is patterns. Patterns are coming from these 3 books. Actually, there are more books, but those are the most important ones. From Christopher Alexander, those books are about architecture, actual buildings and cities and planning, city planning. And the general idea of a pattern is pretty simple. Pattern is like a word in normal language. So table, chair, sofa. Now, table, we sort of know what it means, but there are many ways to create a table, right? So I can challenge you that try to define any table. How many legs or what kind of surface does it have? There is no practical way to define a table. On the other hand, when we talk to each other, we clearly know what is a table, what is not a table. And yet when we go and implement one or build a table, create a table, then we have many options to do it. Same with chair and sofa. The second concept is a language. Language is essentially a collection of the words on specific subject, like furniture language. And the third concept is designs. Designs are like stories. Like there is a square table with 4 chairs and a sofa in a room. Now, just imagine telling this story without using these words. This is almost impossible. Or imagine that 2 people in the room agree that table is something that they agree on, and the third person just thinks it's something entirely different. It's something like a car, right? So language actually helps us to communicate. Language, essentially, this is a great quote from Ludwig Wittgenstein, is the limits of my language are limits of my world. Essentially, if I don't have a word to describe something, I cannot even think about it. Imagine like a car, right? We know what car is. We understand this is specifically Volkswagen Golf, but those are the smaller elements of the car. The thing is that if you're not a mechanic, you probably don't have any words for this, right? So you cannot even discuss the internals of the car unless you learn the language. So what happens is that originally Christopher Alexander created or wrote these books, and he said there were 2 main principles. One, he was saying that the change shouldn't be done as big bang change, but more like incremental and piecemeal. But the second was to actually have that, you need an expert, an architect, talking to normal people in a language that they both can understand. So that's why he created a language that both normal people and architects can understand, so they can talk to each other. And then the people who are actually ordering work, who wants to build a house or want to build a university campus, they can explain themselves to the architects and tell them what they actually want to do. Unless they have the language, there is no practical way that the person who is building a house can even describe his wishes. So back to Will's Creek. What actually happened so far? So first, in the first attempt, what they did, they basically didn't allocate almost any resources, and they did it in a very proficient way. Just a backlog, Scrum, tasks, everything, day after day, stand-ups and everything, right? And they just didn't know what they were doing. They had to have more freedom, and they didn't have that. Instead, they were just managed the same way. And this is totally normal. People would regress to what they know under pressure, under uncertain circumstances. So in the second attempt, they attempted full rewrite. Essentially, we will create a new platform, everything from scratch. So they did allocate quite a lot of resources, but they still didn't introduce creative management. They didn't let people research. They didn't let people experiment. This led to nowhere again. So a typical transformation could look like something like that. And this is something that's why we created all these patterns, cloud native transformation patterns. And this is something that a company would work with, for example, external consultant and talk together about combination of what the company actually needs and what the actual knowledge or what are the possibilities of cloud native. And together they would define a transformation path that is sort of like that, but there are many other options to do it in different ways. So an example transformation would look something like this. You start from transformation champion. This is a person that would drive the change. This makes everyone's life much easier when you have somebody who is committed and driven. Then you want to create a business case, because otherwise maybe there is no point to move to cloud native. Maybe, in your market it's not relevant. Then you want executive commitment. Since most of cloud native transformations are bigger than expected, you want executives to be fully committed to that and support the transformation, not just with budget, but also with their personal investment, energy investment, and being there and helping teams to understand what needs to happen. After that, we would typically recommend to create a small core team and a vision how the entire transformation will look like, very high level. And the core team typically is small, maybe less than 10 people. And that's because, and by the way, most of the companies, enterprises, would make this mistake and go with much bigger team into cloud native transformation, or generally into large innovative projects. It's actually very difficult to innovate with large teams, because when you have a large team, then you have to create complex management structure, complex communication structure. And those structures are actually driving the innovation down. They're actually reducing the innovation. So after you have the team and the vision, you typically go deeper to create architecture and team structure and some sort of planning of educational program and everything like that. And then it's very important to keep the proficient teams, the teams who are working on old legacy applications, to continue doing their job, not to create too much pressure on the new platform. And then the new team, the core team, you need to manage them for creativity. You need to let them be and experiment and try different things. And they do it by exploratory experiments and then POCs and eventually building an MVP. And what they do, obviously, they build distributed systems. This is the cloud native approach, and this is the most effective way to scale the system and provide appropriate resilience and stability. And what they want is to bring the MVP to production readiness so you can start putting first couple of applications on it. In the meanwhile, the old proficient teams, they prepare for onboarding, but they are not immediately onboarding. They are onboarding gradually, maybe one team at a time, two teams at a time. The reason is, that's another mistake that many companies would do. They would bring 20 teams and try to onboard an MVP platform. But MVP is maybe only 20% done, maybe 30% done. At that point, if you put 20 teams on it, there is a very high chance that the platform team, the core team, will drown under the pressure of support tickets. What you want is to onboard one or two teams, teach them how to use it, learn from them, improve the platform, onboard more, and create a consistent cycle of that. And after that, the new teams those new onboarded teams, they can help other teams, and then you can invest more into platform team and expand it. You can create a SRE team. There's a variety of different options. And then after that, you can continue strangling the monolithic application that you have, and even eventually move some lift and shift, some old applications that hardly change over time. It's very important that the newly created creative team will continue investing in the future horizons, continue doing innovation. Now, each one of those patterns, like distributed system, can expand into many more detailed patterns, and like this, each one of those, and you can read those patterns in the book, and there is a separate site called CN Patterns that you can find at the end of the book, of the presentation. And what's important, again, that the creative team continues investing into the three horizons, in innovation and research, and eventually to be ready for the future. A very important element is the cultural element. Daniel Coyle, in his book, The Culture Code, explains it very well. He says culture is not something you are, it's something you do. This is compared to other statements like DNA of a company and things like that. So the problem with DNA of a company is that it cannot be changed. And if you cannot change the culture, then you basically accept it forever and you just live with it. But in reality, culture can change. It's just difficult, and it can be done slowly, step by step, by using things like blameless inquiry, psychological safety, joint responsibility, introducing learning loops, reflective breaks, and a variety of other things. So actually, if you measure what really matters, you can change your culture. It just takes a while. So after those two unsuccessful attempts, eventually the team found a way to balance between proficiency and creativity. And eventually they can do it whenever it is appropriate. What you want to get is the point where you have three levels of the backlog. There is a consistent delivery backlog. That's the horizon one. There is an innovation backlog. Those are the things that you will slowly introduce in the next 6 to 12 months to production. And you also have some experiments going on like serverless or Istio. For some companies, Istio and serverless are not experiments. They are actually in the delivery. They're actually totally in production. But for some others, it's just experimentation and research. Okay, just a quick turn of events, right? And quick is like its understatement. So let's talk quickly about this very, very fast marking change version. I mean, we are living in this weird and scary world, right? When a tiny virus apparently can change our lives in a matter of months, weeks or months. This conference is online conference instead of physical one, and I'm not standing on the stage, which is, very weird situation. And what happens is, if I use the same diagram from earlier, right, there was some balance between newcomers and old customers and old companies. And the new companies like Starlink are slowly replacing the Wells grid, but it still takes months, years. It's always years. But when something like coronavirus comes, it's just drastic reduction of revenue for everyone. Everything stops. Is it possible to be ready for such situation? We are all now sitting in our houses, right? And I'm recording this presentation from my home, and our company is fortunately ready to be remote, reasonably ready. But majority of the companies don't know how to work remote. They don't have immediate access to their infrastructure. They don't know how to communicate remotely. They don't know what to do. There's many customers. We see many of our customers or people we are speaking in the industry, they're just lost. They have no idea what to do. And the reason is that they have no tools to actually quickly adjust to the situation. And again, they have no language even to discuss such adjustment, because actually we never lived through this situation before. None of us lived through such massive drastic change to the entire world when the world is essentially stops from functioning. But I can show you just few of the patterns that potentially could be relevant for you. So for example, dynamic strategy. This is something that we are very strongly believing in, that strategy cannot be static, cannot be, once you define it for the next 5 years, you do the same thing. We are always adjusting. And because we are doing it all the time since we started the company over 5 years ago, it's actually totally normal thing for us to change direction overnight. So for us, although the virus itself was a surprise, but the actions that we took after was not surprising at all. It was actually a totally natural thing to do. And at that point, everything relies on your value hierarchy. What are the things you value? Do you value your people, or you're going to fire them tomorrow? Are you value innovation, or you're going to cut out all the innovation projects the moment you're scared for future? Those are very good questions. And if you never stopped to ask yourself, what are your values? It will be very, very difficult to figure out under pressure. And if you have a learning organization, it will be so much easier to just start experimenting like crazy and do something different. On more technical organizational level, remote teams or management for creativity, those things you could do in the past to be prepared. But since we didn't consider this, then it wasn't even an option. The public cloud, it is an essential tool for now to be able to deal with the crisis. And I'm sure that once coronavirus is over, everyone will be flocking to the public cloud. So there is variety of patterns, variety of words you could use to help yourself to adjust to the situation much faster. By learning the language, by understanding the possibilities, you can actually be more prepared, better prepared, and respond much quicker and more effectively. And to finish the presentation, I will just mention the cognitive biases. This is a massive topic, and I strongly encourage you to read this book by Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, but actually there is a variety of other books. But basically, our brain was built using evolutionary methods. Without going into too much details, essentially, there is a lot of heuristics or this kind of instincts we have in our brain. And most of the time, they're very useful and they're functional and they help us to survive and thrive and develop and grow. But sometimes they're just wrong. The environment is wrong. So it's like in computers, heuristics in computers, heuristical algorithms. They work most of the time, and when they don't work, yeah, whatever. So I wanted to choose just one bias and show it to you. And this bias is illusion of control. It's basically tendency to overestimate one's degree of influence over other external events. So essentially, what it means is that our influence, and it doesn't matter, was it Corona related or cloud native transformation that took years, our impact on the world is actually minor. It's all illusion. The world is much stronger than we are. What we can do instead of trying to change the world is to adapt. So this whole presentation, this whole patterns, this whole story is all about being adaptable, is about adaptability, is not about specific cloud native knowledge. If you have the tools to adapt, you will survive. And if not, somebody else will. So the stranger is coming. And now I have two strangers. One is Starling Bank, pretty nice one, and then the coronavirus. They are coming, if you want it or not, in different shapes. The only question, are you ready? Thank you, and you can read about this in our Cloud Native Transformation book by O'Reilly. You can also download from this link, or not download, you can order a physical deck of cards with 76 cards with patterns from the book. And we are continuously adding more and more patterns to the site. And also recently, in last week, we created this nice guide for how to stay cool in the quarantine. That is again related to the coronavirus. This is just a nice thing to read. Maybe it will help you to learn how to survive and thrive in the quarantine. This was written by two of our employees, and one of them is actually clinical psychologist. So it's actually a pretty useful guide for this. So thank you for listening, and please ask questions. You can ask now or on social media or whatever other way. And thank you.